Good morning. It is first thing in the morning on April the 3rd. If you hear various noise, my guinea pigs, I don't know what's happening to them. They're just very excited this morning and I don't want to quiet them down because they're having a great time. So I thought today, first thing to kick off my weekend, I would talk about the books that I read in the month of March. Spoiler, I read 22, but this month was definitely a quantity over quality situation. Not intentionally, but that's just how it turned out. So I read 22 books in total and I was giving out 3 stars like it was candy on Halloween night. So let's go ahead and get into my reading month. Also, for the sake of my outfit, please enjoy that I'm not wearing a sweater, but my arms are so cold. So I have my little tracking notebook and we're gonna go through it here. So the first thing I read at the top of the month was A Quart of Silver Flames. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. Now, something about my rating system, I use it very haphazardly. So like a 1 star is I really didn't enjoy it, wouldn't recommend it to anyone. It's just not good in my opinion. There are no 1 stars in this. A 2 star is there were some elements I liked about it. There are contexts in which I would refer it to someone, but it was definitely not for me. 3 stars, like this one, is there were elements that I enjoyed or really enjoyed, but there were severe flaws within it that I can't in good conscience give a 4 star. Because of some glaring flaws. And then 4-star reads are, I really enjoyed it, will reread it, probably will talk about it a lot on this channel in context of videos. And then 5 stars are favorites of all time. So 3 stars. This is obviously the 4th installment, 5th if you count the novella, but like nobody counts the Christmas special as canon. In terms of the ACOTAR series, it certainly measured up, I would say, but there are the consistent flaws that I've seen in the series. In this one, we are specifically following Nesta and her journey, her post-traumatic journey, I suppose, after the war. But there were some glaring flaws, certainly could have used an editor, very repetitive content, and multiple. At one point I was discussing this with a friend and I said there are multiple climaxes in this book that don't pay off. And when I said multiple climaxes, she says, yeah, there were. A lot of smut in this book. The smut, she does great. But in terms of the actual plot, this is virtually plotless. There are multiple plots and threads that we are given at the beginning of the story that ultimately it almost feels like are forgotten about and we just never revisit. So 3 out of 5 stars, definitely enjoyed it, but I mean, it was fine. This video is already at 4 minutes. That's not good. Next, I read Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So I really liked certain elements within this. This is about a young woman whose life is relatively falling apart, and then she is giving a house sitting position and it quickly turns sinister. I really enjoyed certain elements of this, just the feeling I used to have sleeping over at someone's house for the first time when I was younger, and just the uneasiness of knowing the habitat in which you're surrounded by isn't yours was already an unsettling feeling that like lays deep within me, and it's explored in this book. However, I do think this will be a polarizing book because I think the ending will either make it a 5 star for you or make it a 3 star. And for me, unfortunately, it was a 3 star, but I am interested to read more Riley Sager because I did really enjoy the writing style. I really enjoyed the buildup. I just think in terms of the final twist at the end, it wasn't my sort of plot twist. I have also read Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I really liked that one. All right, next I read The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chotsky. What did I give this one? So I gave this one a 3.5 star. So it was cute. It's a teen fiction that deals with a large heist, a motley crew of sorts. And there were certain elements I really liked about this. Again, the characters were fun. They played off each other fun. I liked it enough to get the second book, and I read this as one of the prompts for Tis the Damn Readathon. Also, the reason I read so many books this month is because I was participating in an online readathon, and also I had my vacation this month. So this is not the normal amount that I would read in a month. Next, I read One Dark Throne by Kinjar Blake. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. So I like this series to begin with. It's I don't even know if this is a thing, but like a grim dark for YA. So this is a very dark series that centers around 3 sisters that are competing for the throne. The way to win the throne is to kill 2 of your competing sisters. And it is just a lot of fun. There's an elementalist, there's a naturalist, and there's a poisoner. Very dark series, but I like it. Next, I read The Project by Courtney Summers. I don't even have to look at my paper. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. So, what did I like about it? I liked the cult element. I liked the setting. I liked the idea of the familial bonds and the sisterhood ties. I love a strong story about sisters, and this really delivered on that. I think Courtney Summers did a great job in building and showing us the attachment the sisters have towards each other. I felt the same way for Sadie. I think she does female relationships very well, especially familial female relationships. However, I wish it had been a tad more atmospheric. There were times where I wish we could have just settled in the situation or in the setting that we were in and learn more about it and get a little more description. I just think if she would have made this maybe 80 pages longer, even 50 pages longer, it would have been to the benefit of she could have really painted a picture of this cult and of the surroundings and of everything. However, in saying that, it felt like good bones to a story. It just wasn't fleshed out enough for me. Next, I read The Witch's Heart, which I gave 4 out of 5 stars. So if you are a fan of Circe or Son of Achilles, I really think you're going to enjoy this book. I had a lot of fun with it. So this is about a witch that goes away and Loki begins to visit her and they slowly fall in love and she becomes his mistress of sorts before becoming his wife, and she sires 3 children of very abnormal circumstance and nature, and it is just so good. But I hesitate to describe it to anyone because you sound a little crazy. So she has a daughter with Loki, normal daughter seemingly, and then she proceeds to have a wolf for a child, and finally a snake. So if that didn't capture your attention, you're probably on the wrong channel, because that sold me. I didn't even know that was an element, but the second she had a wolf for a son, I was like, I'm hooked. That's it, you're a 4. It was so close to being a 5-star, but as the month went on, I don't think it'll be a favorite of all time, but it will definitely be like a book I push onto my friends and say like, this is weird, read this. And the ending is just so good. Next, I read Kink Stories, which is a anthology of fiction works by different authors. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. It explores various kinks within relationships, and in saying that, when I picked it up, I thought it was going to explore various sexual kinks and the dynamics that can form within a relationship from that. However, it does delve more into just kinks in general, and there were a couple of stories that I wound up dogging, which I do not do much, which means I must really like it, that I wanted to go back and visit. Specifically, one story explores a couple that's been together for a while, and the wife decides she wants to explore BDSM, but the husband is very uncomfortable with the fact. He doesn't want to hurt his wife. And it was just a really interesting exploration of people's sexual dynamics when they merge together. How are they going to fall? And it was very interesting. I love anthologies. You get so many different voices that you can explore, and there's just so many different viewpoints for one subject. It's great. Next, I read Beet Reads by Emily Henry. I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this. So generally, I'm not a contemporary fiction kind of gal. I read this on a whim, and do you know what? I really wound up enjoying it. It does deal with heavier. So when I got this, I tried Book of the Month for a couple of months, a year ago, during the pandemic, I think. Ultimately, I decided it wasn't for me, but this was pitched as like a summer rom-com, and I will say it is certainly not that. It deals with depression, it deals with grief, it deals with a lot of heavier topics that I probably wouldn't want if I'm just looking for fun. But in saying that, because of those heavier topics that they explore, I really wound up enjoying it. Was it a silly premise? Absolutely. Were the characters thrown into circumstance specifically just to make the romance interesting? For sure. But it was a great time. I liked it. It was good. All right. We're halfway there. So the second half of my month leads into my better reading. So we're done. There are still some more 3 stars coming, but we're done the bigger chunk of the 3-star stack. So next, I read The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I gave this a 4 out of 5 star. This has been an anticipated series. I have been so worried about Robin Hobb disappointing me. I know she's a big name in fantasy, and I know she's a big female name in fantasy specifically, and I put a lot of weight to that because it is a male-centric genre, and it was heavily dominated by males for so long, and I had heard so many great things about her that I was just so scared I wouldn't like her in the end, but she did not disappoint. I had a lot of fun with this. I will say tonally, you have to get back into the mindset of more traditionally written fantasy. So it's a lot more dense, a lot less dialogue, heavy on description. But if you like that sort of style, then I think you'll really enjoy this. This follows around a bastard son to the would have been king, but that would have been king stepped aside so his brother could rule in his stead. So essentially he just becomes, Fitz, our main character, becomes a royal bastard. And the king decides to use that to his advantage and train him to be a assassin. And he makes bonds with animals and dogs, and enough said. I was gonna be sold from that. Next, I read Phantom of the Opera. This was a reread. I read this when I was younger. I enjoyed it when I was younger. I rated this 3 out of 5 stars. I don't really have much to say to this besides, like, I love the Phantom. I just love him. Next, I read Persepolis, and I gave this, surprisingly, I think at first I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, but the more I sat on it, it's a 4.5 out of 5. I don't think it will be a best of all time. And I will preface this by saying that is specifically because of the style of book. So it is a comic style. For me, that's not my medium of preference. So because of that, it probably won't be a best of all time. But that being said, it's a darn good book. Next, I read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. I gave this a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Now, I know this is a very beloved book, and I can see why. This centers around 2 sisters that go to an island to participate in this carnival of sorts, and the grand prize is you get a wish. This is a series. I won't be continuing in the series, but the reason I give it a 2.5 is there were certainly, it felt young in not a good way to me. It felt a little bit like sloppy writing, very inexperienced writing as well. it also just turned out not to be the story for me. But I would certainly lend this out to a friend. If it became their favorite book, I would give it to them, because I do think this would be for some people. I certainly can see the appeal of it. I do understand there are friends that I would recommend this to based on their reading taste, but it certainly did not align with mine. Therefore, it gets the 2.5. It didn't do everything wrong, but I will die on this hill that it was sloppy writing and generally just inconsistent. There was an inconsistent beat throughout the entire book. Next, I read Hero of Ages by Brandon Sanderson. So I only gave out 3 5-stars this entire month, and I read 22 books. Obviously, this is one of them. What do I say about this? I was so excited after finishing this that I immediately filmed. I'm a planner, so I have all of my videos planned out, usually for about 2 months ahead of time. I was so excited about this that I just dropped everything and I filmed the review for the entire Mistborn series. So this was done so clever. So I do think there's a second book slump. So what is it called? The Well of Ascension, the second book in the Mistborn original trilogy, I do think suffers from a second book slump. However, a lot of what we're doing in the second book pays off in the third. And if you're familiar with the Stormlight Archive, if you're familiar with Brandon Sanderson, this is how he works. There tends to be a lot of foundation. There tends to be not info dump because he takes his time with it, but there tends to be a lot of information that you have to settle with. And I was just worried how long it took for the payoff, that it wouldn't have paid off. I lost a little bit of faith, but it came back at the end and it really stuck the landing. And I just love Vin. I love Sazed. I just love them. I love them. It was so good. If I haven't convinced you to read Mistborn yet, you gotta do it. Just do it. It's good. There's great payoff. One of my friends has, and she loved it. You'll love it. You should just read it. Next, I reread Words of Radiance, which was not on my TBR, but I really wanted to squeeze in as I'm going to read Oathbringer this month and then read Rhythm of War for my birthday month, which I thought would be a nice full circle because I started my Stormlight journey last year and I wound up reading Oathbringer for my birthday month. So a year later, I'll read Rhythm of War. I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. In the grand scheme of the Stormlight Archive, though they're all multiple perspectives, every book hyper focuses on one character so we can get to know them better and get to know their background and what kind of makes them tick. And in this one, this is Shallan's story, her and Jasna are my favorite characters, so obviously I was going to like this a whole lot more. 5 out of 5 stars. I love the series. It's one of my favorite series of all time, hence the 5 out of 5. Next, I read Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. This beautiful copy. So I have these on my e-reader, but I loved the first book enough that I did get myself this gorgeous edition. Oh, it's just beautiful. Anyways, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 star. Definitely would recommend. I had a lot of fun with the series. I'm excited to see what they do for a TV show, and I plan on reading book 2 and 3 probably just in this month because I can't stop thinking about this series. It's the Grisha trilogy. It centers around a young girl who has a best friend named Mal, and it seems to be Russian inspired. That's the kind of vibe I got. And they are in the sort of foot soldier army. Mal is a great tracker. Oh, she's like a cartographer, and it's soon discovered that she's actually a very, very powerful Grisha, and she is carted off to the Citadel of sorts, but like the hub of the kingdom, and separated from Mal. She then meets a young man called the Darkling, and while she has the power of sunlight, he wields the power of darkness, and a friendship forms. And I'll leave it there. But it's good. and I would recommend it. And there's a Netflix show coming out about it. I feel like I pitched that well. Next in my journey to try and find the weirdest book ever, because Bunny by Mona Awad left a hole in my heart, I read The Convenience Store Woman. I gave this 3.5 out of 5 star. I told you, I gave 3 stars like candy, indiscriminately. If you knocked on my door, I gave you a piece of candy, and it was a 3 star. Convenience Store Woman, 3.5 out of 5. I liked it. I don't want to say I didn't like it, because I did, which is why I gave it a 3.5. There were elements in it that I just didn't completely capture my attention or my imagination. It was just a cool, weird dive into a lady who just walks different from the rest of us. She is just a different sort of character. She works in a convenience store. She takes her job very seriously and is surrounded by people that she doesn't really understand. She's not like everybody else. She doesn't know how to react to certain things, and she really mimics and trains herself based off of the people around her. And I found that element super interesting, and her obsession with her job super interesting. I wish it had just gotten a little weirder, and I don't know what I mean by that, but I found it in Bunny. So I know what I'm looking for. It's just hard to put into words. I just wish it had taken like one step weirder, and I think it would have been a 5 star. But it stayed safely in its weird box of her kind of like picking bits of people's personalities and melding it into her own, and it was just super interesting and weird. Next, I read Remote Control. I gave this a 4 out of 5 star. We follow a young girl named Fatima. Well, in saying that, hold on. We actually follow the book opens with a young girl walking through a village, and everybody starts yelling, Sokova's here, Sokova's here, and they put out their lights, they lock their doors, they bring all of their children inside, and eventually she knocks on a door, and the family's like, death has come to our doorstep. So she is walking death. We then jump back in time when she is 7 years old, and her name is Fatima, and she has a loving family, and she's watching this beautiful meteor shower, and a piece of the sky falls down into her backyard and into this tree that she often sits in. She has a fox for a companion. I picked this up because I thought it would be weird. I'm on this journey, and I'm taking it very seriously. And it was bizarre in a great way. The more I think, maybe it's a 4.5. I ate this book up, and I fully intend to reread this maybe this month or maybe next month, but I really enjoyed it. So we're following this girl as she is kind of wandering seemingly at the beginning aimlessly. She has nowhere to go. She has no social ties whatsoever, and there's a fox as her companion. So yeah, it's so little that I really can't say too much besides that opening. If that didn't hook you, I don't know what will, but I can't say too much because it's so small that I will give something away. But it's well worth your time. It is on the pricier side. Like, this is $26.99. That's the Canadian price, and it's really tiny, but it really is worth it because it's just weird. Next, I read City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. I liked this book. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. So honestly, the latter half, I'm saying these out in the order in which I read them. Last bit of my month was fantastic. Beginning of my month, not so great. Maybe the most mediocre. I really, really, really enjoyed this book. I got this as a suggestion from Brightness Katie. She told me to read Kingdom of Copper when I asked her what I should read next on my TBR, and then I realized I hadn't even read the first book. It was on my TBR card that sits in my room. So I picked this up, and it was just a phenomenal suggestion. I can't wait to read book 2. This ends in such a great way of her putting a mark on someone, and it was just so good. Ooh. Next, I read In the Quick by Kate Hope Day. I gave this a 3 out of 5 star. It was fine. This is about a young woman who is very, very intelligent. Her uncle develops a sort of cell fuel energy that takes a carrier spacecraft and their entire crew very, very far away. Unfortunately, they get stuck there, and her uncle passes prior to the actual launch of the spaceship, so he's unable to help in any sort of way. There's a time skip in which our main character, goes to this elite academy and training for the space station, and then there's a big swath of time in which she trains, and then she's a space aero engineer. I wish it was, I don't know, it just felt a little bit flat. Next, I read Amari and the Night Brothers. I gave this a 5 out of 5 star. It was such a cute middle grade story. I really can't say that enough. I had a lot of fun with it. I really liked the main character. She's this feisty, strong, just very headstrong character who has a purpose, and she's trying to find her missing brother or determine what circumstance he actually went missing, and she's not letting anyone get in her way. It has great family values. It speaks to poverty and a lack of understanding. It speaks to different communities merging together. It speaks to racism, but it handles it all in a really clever way that I would very much suggest for the age range of like 8 to 13. I think they would really enjoy this book, and I know I'm definitely going to keep this on the shelf. I touched a little bit about it on my reading vlog, but I like to collect books that later on my kids, I will feel comfortable knowing what values those books are pushing, because there is so much media out there. It's really fun for me to get ahead of this and read and see all of these various bits of representation in children's stories now, and collect it and have it on my shelf for my kids to explore when they get old enough and when I have kids. Last, I read The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I don't have it to hold up because I just borrowed it from my work. I did a loan and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. So I liked the premise of it. We're following a young woman who decides to, I don't want to say the word, she decides to make the choice to unlive her life, and then she finds herself in limbo. She finds herself in the Midnight Library. It is a library full of different opportunities. If she had chosen differently in her life, there's a book for that, and it tells her how her life would have ended up instead. And she opens whatever book, reads the first line of it, and then finds herself in that world. And she can choose to stay in that life, or if she is unhappy there, she can go back to the library and continue to look through the books until she finds the perfect life for her. Ultimately, I decided it wasn't the book for me. I didn't really like the values that it was pushing, especially with the ending. I didn't like how depression was explored. I didn't like how anxiety was explored within it. I thought a lot of it fell flat, and I felt it was misrepresented in certain ways. Now, that was just my perspective. I know people that they thought it really changed their perspective on mental health. I know it humanized a lot of what people are going through. To some people, I've heard some really great feedback from it. Now, I gave it a 3 out of 5 because not all elements were bad. Also, I just thought that it was almost a ridiculous premise for a character. She's great at music. She was almost a pro athlete. She's really smart. And she almost had the love of her life. It was just a ridiculous it almost cheapened, I think, the story, as opposed to having someone have a relatively normal life, instead of almost being a superstar musician and almost being a world Olympic medal winning athlete and almost being a Arctic researcher for global warming. I think it would have been more fascinating to explore a regular human life, and the different facets of what you can come to regret through that versus like, oh, I should have been a superstar. Could have been the next Taylor Swift. Could have been the next Joan Jett. It's just, I think it was contrary to the point of the story. And it just wound up cheapening the ending for me. So I left it on a little bit of a low note, but honestly, like the last like 5 books before that were really great for me. Sorry if I'm moving a lot. My legs fell asleep because I chose to film on the ground today and I don't know why. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me for the month. I hope you guys had a really great reading month. So I read a lot of books because I wound up being on vacation, but I had a lot of fun doing it. And I hope you guys had an equally successful reading month. And I don't really have an outro, so I will just see you in my next video.